Tennessee, David Toulis.
When something happens, write an affidavit. An affidavit is a statement of fact in which you recount the words of the other party, the actions of the other party, and you make a note, and then you make an accounting. And then you get it notarized to show contemporaneity with the event. In other words, you get it notarized right after you write it to show that you wrote it within a day after the evil encounter that you had with the officer, or the troubling encounter you had with the neighbor, or the dealings you had with a service provider that you think is maybe not being fair to you, or you've had some unusual conversation with someone, or someone's making a claim upon you or against you, and you suppose that it's wrong. You're confident that it's a mistake, or outside of that person's authority. And so what you do is you take my advice. You write an affidavit. An affidavit should have in it only the facts. It should have in it what you said to the best of your recollection, what the counterparty said to the best of your recollection. And if you can't quote the person, then paraphrase and quote any key phrase or key words that stick out in your mind. Right, assuming there's no audio recording of that encounter, or no video recording of that encounter or phone call, you have a record of it. And you do that because you feel vulnerable. You do that because you feel like you have to make a claim, or you might have to defend against somebody else's claim against you. And that is what I have suggested to Jamichael Parks, the victim of a sheriff's deputy, one of Eric Watson's deputies in Bradley County. Dale Liner, the aggressive and strong deputy who is now the object of an internal affairs probe, as they say in police departments, the kind of whitewash department. And Jamichael Parks has a duty with having been arrested. He was, as he tells me, he was arrested and held for 2 hours in chains, effectively. These are probably the plastic chains of the modern surveillance state. Don't have to carry heavy chains around like the Southern slave masters did. You just use plastic and the wristicuffs, plastic wristicuffs, and tie up the subject and have him sit there on the curb while you fulminate over what his future will be when you get done with him. Right? That's apparently what according to Jamichael Parks, Dale Liner did in his arrest. And so the duty of Jamichael Parks and his cousin Terrell Parks, a younger man, Jamichael is 33, Terrell is probably early 20s. Two men harassed by cops. It is important, as they have a partial video record posted on Facebook a couple days ago. It was at 25,000 views. I guess that's called going viral locally here in Chattanooga. The job they have is to write down in detail what happened. And the reason I suggest that for you, my listener, as a bit of personal advice, is that I've seen in examples where the eyewitness from the passage of day and day and day forgets key phrases, key things. And I'm thinking of Hanson Melvin, who was abused by Officer David Campbell of the CPD in 2016. His affidavit, as I was looking it over the other day, omitted key phrases that came out later in the audio file. So that is something that you forget. Your memory will fade. You may have in mind the highlights of that recollection of that wondrous encounter with the agent of righteousness and goodness, right? The cop or the regulator. And it's good just to have a record of it. So that's just something that you need to make note of, and don't just make a statement that is the record, but get it notarized, and that shows the time since the stamp is on the paper, the time of the creation of the words on that paper, hopefully using sans serif type, right? This is David Toulis, and I argue always in sans serif type, which would be to say Helvetica, the neutral Swiss type, the Swiss typeface or font. I like sans serif partly because it's very neutral. It doesn't have knives on the letters with legs, and letters with endpoints of a line, like the capital letter A has the little shoes on it. Those aren't really shoes. Those are blades. And the good people always use serifs on their type because their type is compulsory, right? They pass a law, they pass a panhandling ordinance, and it is compulsory. We believe in force and threat in our enlightened age. And so we're going to print out another 9 pages, as we are in our Chattanooga City Council ordinance on panhandling, of coercive verbiage, making due obsequies, of course, in the beginning to First Amendment rights, protected speech rights, right? David Toulis here, 800-8949, brought to you by euronews.com, euronews.com. We're live on Facebook and live on YouTube. And get for your smartphone the TuneIn radio app. It is free. And if you select our radio station, the station that really, I think, makes people take notice of what's happening locally, you'll be all the better for it. You won't miss anything, and you'll catch Bloomberg after the lunch hour. We've got a great local news show at noon, and Sean Hannity at 3. Sean Hannity, the great investigator of nefarious doings in our federal district. And from 3 to 6, and in the morning, just a great drive-in show, 6 to 9, overly generous coverage, constantly updated, live, twaddle-free, right? A twaddle-free newscast every morning here at 92.7. And you, my listener, if you tell a friend about my show, I will double my listenership. So you have a great influence on my ratings. If I cared about that and wanted ratings, I would count on you to tell a friend. And then my listenership would go from 1 to 2. And that is a jump of 100%. I'm really glad that you're thinking about that. Just recommend me to your friends. We're brought to you by euronews.com, euronews.com. And I'm just bursting with things to say and things to publish. One thing that I wanted to just suggest, I've got some headlines here. You might say this is the local newscast of things I have wanted to mention, just haven't gotten around to, and they go in several directions. But our show's about ideas here, ideas as much as just news and analysis. And it's 800-8949, 800-8949, and it's this whole question about trade wars. Trade wars are they have their causes, and generally they're bad. Trade wars come from powers, national powers, government powers that are mercantilist in perspective, right? When we hear about free trade as regards the WTO and NAFTA, that is not free trade, right? Real free trade is open borders, open markets, and tariffs that are non-existent. The feds do have authority for obtaining revenue by tariff. That is one of their only lawful ways of obtaining it, excises, imposts, and duties in the Constitution. The feds, however, operate administratively the income tax system aside from that authority, apart from that authority. And everybody, of course, is under the gun this weekend if they haven't filed their 1040 to get that done. Now, free trade, though, and trade wars are part of the mercantilist system. Mercantilism is nationalism in economics, where your national government is always looking out for your big corporations and fighting for their prosperity, right? That's what we have at the top of the system, the top of the heap. And trade wars come in part because we have gluts. We have China offending us because of steel dumping. Okay, why does China dump steel in the marketplace? Well, it does so because it takes part just as we do in overproduction. And how so? How is it that the American economy and that the Chinese economy overproduce? We know China does because we've seen in photographs, probably on Facebook, we've seen those amazing photographs of empty cities, right? Ghost cities made all on borrowed yuans, borrowed currency units in China, and the currency units are put into circulation because of overconfidence in the ability to repay on the part of the developer or the municipal provincial government, and the easy, which we have for 30 years now, at least for the past 10 years, we've had an artificially low rate of interest. You have over overproduction and glut. You have a glut in our country, in the United States. We have a glut of credit, and that is because when the meltdown happened in 2008, the owner of the economy, the Federal Reserve System, and the banking sector said, we have got to stop this. We have got to create confidence by making loans easy and cheap. And so there's been a continuation of already a 2-decade-old practice of a suppression of the rate of interest. The rate of interest is a key indicator as to what things will be valued in the future. If you don't have a real floating interest rate, one set by the actual marketplace and all the thousands and tens of thousands of people in the marketplace, but one set by the central bank, well, you have overconfidence and too much easy borrowing and too much easy creation of what? That's right, of capacity, right? You have factories being built, devices being devised, programs being set up, shopping malls being built, apartment complexes going up as they are in Chattanooga, new hotels going up, and there's not a real demand for said services and said space. Many times, there's not real demand for trucks. There's not real demand for infrastructure that was built back in the 80s and 90s in the earlier uproars, the earlier exhibitions of irrational exuberance, right? From that phrase from former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan, and so we have a huge creation of infrastructure, all kinds of infrastructure, capitalist infrastructure borrowed into existence. That's called overcapacity. And when you have overcapacity, then what you have to do to maintain your edge, you have to dump your stuff. And that's what China's been doing. That's what we do around the globe. We have too much things that have been produced, too many programs that have been produced. And since we can't raise prices due to the glut, so what we do is we dump overproduction wherever we can. Charles U. Smith points out that overcapacity, subsidies, and overproduction force corporations to slash costs to maintain profitability. Cost cutting is a never-ending process in a world stuffed with too much capacity. Labor costs are slashed by offshoring factories and offices. Quality is reduced by buying the cheapest low-quality components and scrimping on quality controls. R&D, research and development, trimmed. Testing, he says, is hurried to get the next product cycle out early to maintain a slight competitive edge. With cheap credit and profits scarce, corporations borrow to survive, and they become zombie corporations. And that whole process of financialization, the whole game, which is paid for on borrowed money, right? Buying back shares, that's all done to maintain some slight edge. So we have a system in our economy that is very, very it's not very elastic. It's highly structured around debt and the repayment of debt and the struggle to maintain some kind of profitability amid an overproduction and amid excess capacity. That excess capacity, to use a word from the libertarian analyst, is called malinvestment. And we have all around us today in the American economy, we have vast monuments of malinvestment. And when the crisis hits, right, when the equities crash and the credit markets seize up, as they did once before, there'll be another reason for it. This time, not perhaps the liar loans packaged into securities, but some other flashpoint, some detail, no doubt, will be a flashpoint in the next disaster. You have investment, creation of things that are not really needed. Think of it this way: half of the new pickup trucks you see on the highway are really shouldn't be there, right? The people in them shouldn't have borrowed from them. The truck shouldn't have even been produced, right? You have apartment complexes that shouldn't have been built, but they're there, right? And when the crisis hits, when there's a recognition that we've overbuilt and there's not real demand for these goods, right? There's financialized demand created by these financial schemes in the financial sector. There is that demand, but real demand there's not. Well, when we all recognize that, when the market recognizes that, the mass of players, led probably by the big investment houses like CalPERS, the California retirement system, the big players that of course move before you do, there will be a sudden recognition and valuations that are sky high, that are artificially propped up by credit, will come down to earth, and that's a hit. Okay, that's something that is inevitable. It has to happen. It is. I'm not a prophet to say this. It's happened many times in many countries where there is a fiat currency, an artificial currency, a non-referential fiat currency issued by the government through its friends at its central bank, the people who print the money and add slap zeros on the money to keep up with demand for money, right? And you have Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela doing that. It got so bad there that he had to slash 3 zeros off, and he's issuing a new I think bolivar, a new currency. The sovereign bolivar, perhaps, is the names I'm trying to recall from yesterday's note taking on the economy. And so we have this system ahead, and we're not living in the real world. We are living in an idea sphere created by easy money and easy credit. What has to happen, though, is a restoration of lawful coin and lawful currency. And I ask about. It is Friday, and so sometimes Friday I want to reflect on why we're here. We're here, and I would put the blame on the Christian church, not Christianity per se, but the Christian church, where no one has ever taught about why we're facing a disaster. There's not been one sermon, I bet, this year in Chattanooga where the minister of the gospel has read his scriptures and can say, because we, God's people, have rejected God's word en masse, right? As a people, we've rejected God's word. We've lived in fear. Our economy, our national economy, our government, and all the people who are dependent on it, and all those who are dependent on government for good advice, right, for protection, they are going to be sorely abused for their misplacement of confidence. And the Bible readings would be out of Proverbs, out of Leviticus, for example. Leviticus 19:35 says, "You shall do no injustice in judgment, in measurement of length, weight, or volume." And what that's saying is that you can't have an elastic currency like we have now. You can't have a non-referential medium of exchange like what we have now. Look in your pocket. What does that piece of paper give you claim to? It gives you claim to nothing. It used to. Leviticus 26:26 says, "When I have cut off your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in one oven, and they shall bring back your bread by weight, and you shall eat and not be satisfied." There you have what Germany had, what Hungary had in their mass inflations, what you have in Venezuela. That's the picture in Venezuela. And there are many passages. Let me see if I can. Okay, yeah, here. Deuteronomy 25:13. You shall not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. Of course, if you're involved in business and you're a shyster, you have two weights in your bag. When it's to your advantage, you use the heavy one, and when it's to your advantage, if the transaction is going the other way, buying versus selling, you use the other one, right? You do that to cheat the other side. People who are stuck using Federal Reserve notes, green rectangles, dollars, they and you, are you not, are a victim. In Proverbs 16, the Christian minister should say, "Hear this, my people. Honest weights and scales are the Lord's. All the weights in the bag are his work." Again, weights and measures. Proverbs 20:10. Diverse weights and diverse measures, they are both alike, an abomination to the Lord. Now, when's the last time you ever heard of a Christian hearing a sermon about that, and the minister saying, "We live in an ungodly economy. Our entire economy in America, in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, is thriving pretendedly on this system of increasing monetary base." Micah 6:11 says, "Shall I count pure those with the wicked scales and with the bag of deceitful weights?" When you have differing weights, you are involved in what the Federal Reserve System is involved in. It used to be that the Federal Reserve System did issue lawful notes. They were called Federal Reserve notes. We now call them silver certificates. They're still called Federal Reserve notes, but they're not really notes. They're not a real legal note that they give the holder of that note a claim upon the real thing, the real dollar, right? The real dollar would be a coin such as a Morgan dollar, which is a silver coin, a kind of nice, heavy, thunking sounding piece of change that could rattle around in your pocket if you if you just believed in it. So we have these provisions in the Old Testament that, again, where you find the public policy of God. Leviticus 19:36 says, "You shall have honest scales, honest weights, an honest ephah, and an honest hin." In other words, if you're going to measure something for a gallon, it had better be a real gallon, so that the buyer of the gallon of milk gets a gallon of milk. I am the Lord your God, he says, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Because the Christian people have rejected these standards, they have rejected them. We live in an age that's unmoored by the truth, and it's hard to find our way here in Chattanooga out from this dark shadow. It's a dark shadow that people don't even see. People who should be the most discerning. I would call them God's people, right? I would call them, as a longtime former deacon in the Presbyterian Church, I would call them God's people, and they are. But they've not been taught that. Their ministers have not seen the disaster all around. They have not seen the slavery. They have not seen the judicial industrial complex as a wicked mechanism, as a replacement of God's justice. They have not been angered by the abuse here in Chattanooga, here in Hamilton County, of the poor, the innocent, the stranger, the alien, the Hispanic, right? The African American, the ancestor of the slave, who is still under the wrath of the executive state, still held arbitrarily, as was Jamichael Parks. This is David Toulis. Caller, you're live on the air. What's on your mind?
I know you don't have much time, David. I got saved because of the passage, "Thou shalt not be diverse weights and measures in thy bag." And I'm like, this guy really knows what he's talking about. But the key to this is a case called Juilliard versus Greenman, when the one dissenting opinion, who actually knew the founding fathers, said, "I only see evil likely to follow." And that's when the court ruled that you could be compelled to accept a piece of paper, promise of redemption, but ultimately was to be redeemed. That's like what we have today, with no ultimate promise of redemption. And Justice Field said, "I only see evil likely to follow. No government founded upon law can compel basically worthless paper upon the creditor in lieu of a monetary obligation." Why not pay all the debts by printing money? Why not pay all the obligations by printing money? Why the printing press can in one day extinguish all debt, if you actually believe paper can be compelled upon somebody as money. Now, I'm paraphrasing, but he's a genius. It's a case called Juilliard versus Greenman. The dissenting opinion is Justice Field, the only Supreme Court justice who knew the founding fathers.
And that was the case in the late 1800s.
It was 1864, I believe.
Just during the war.
1868 could have been.
I think it was
late
after the war.
1860s.
Well, listen, I think you're making a good point. And Mike, thanks for calling. This is David Toulis. I argue for near over far, small over big, simple over complex, and personal over corporate. That is to say, personal over corporate and physical over abstract. This is David Toulis. I do thank you for giving me just a couple minutes of your time. We are Nougat Radio, 92.7 FM. And thank you.
Keon Rose, Nougat Radio News Talk 92.7 Sports Now. In baseball, the defending Southern League champion Chattanooga Lookouts fell to the Pensacola Blue Wahoos 6-5. The Lookouts tried to rally, closing a 6-1 seventh-inning deficit before falling short in the ninth inning. Highly touted prospect Steven Gonsalves will make his second start of the year in Game 2 of the series. Baylor blasts McCallie 8-2. The game was tightly contested for 5 innings, with Baylor leading McCallie 1-0. And then the top of the 6th inning happened. The Red Raiders offense erupting for 7 runs. Baylor improves to 13-2 on the season and 8-1 in region play. Baylor's school assistant football coach and former Red Bank head coach Tim Daniels has died. The cause? An apparent heart attack at the age of 58 years old. Daniels was an assistant head coach at Baylor for 5 years and was Red Bank's head coach for 10 years before that. Keon Rose, Nougat Radio News Talk 92.7 Sports Now.
3, 2,
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
Chattanooga cops say they're trying to track down 6 members of the Athens Park Blood Street Gang, part of the massive RICO operation that's been going on since last month. Cops say the 6 are wanted for various violent crimes in the area. A 2% teacher pay raise was proposed at the county school board meeting, but not everyone is in favor. Board member Rhonda Thurman says that money could be used to better improve the school infrastructure, saying when we get some extra money, we always put it into salaries. David Ballard, the man accused of starting a riot at the Hamilton Place Mall last month, testified before the court saying he did it because he was spat on and felt compelled to retaliate, and that's why he pulled a gun. His alleged actions caused a stampede at the mall. We caught video of it. You can see it on our Facebook page. As part of his plea deal, he's banned from the mall for life, and he's been placed on enhanced probation. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 News now.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on Nooga Radio 92.7 FM. WPLC HD4 Ottawa. W224AZ Chattanooga.
Serving Chattanooga.
Broadcasting live from the center of the universe. The Tennessee Valley's most listened to news talk station.
Nooga Radio 92.7.